Okay, welcome everybody. Today is our second statistics class. Let's see now. First of all, are there any questions? Anybody? I know there were some problems with about how to register, and also problems about how to pay and so on. I sent several notifications from Manaba, and hopefully, especially the last one, I hope that clarified. Apparently, you can't add in your access key at the moment. I think that's what they said. So you'll have to do it at the end of the grace period. And then they said there could be even a disruption of about 1 day after you enter your access key, where you won't actually be able to access the site. Kind of strange, but anyway, hopefully that clarifies things. But if there are any questions, can you please go ahead and ask them? Okay. Let's see. Okay, and I'd like to hear a little bit of feedback. How was the Khan Academy so far?
Professor?
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
In Cengage, when I was doing the assignment, I don't think we can see whether we put the right answer or the wrong one.
Can you say that again? You'd like what?
I think, if I'm not mistaken, there are 3 attempts in the assignment.
Right.
And then we can't really see if we're putting in the right answers or the wrong answers, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
I think after, really? You should be able to know if you got the right answer or the wrong answer.
Because I was doing the other assignments with the same program, and they would, yeah.
I think when you enter the answer, it doesn't tell you if it's right or wrong. Okay, I'll have to check that. Okay. So can our TA make a note of that, please, that we have to check that, and we'll check that after class.
Okay, Professor, I will note it.
Okay, thank you.
So much.
Okay, let's look at Webassign for a moment. So let me share the screen. Let me share a screen. Okay. I want to share Webassign here. Okay. All right, can you see Webassign here? By the way, speaking about Webassign, no, sorry, not speaking about Webassign, but I tried this new browser. It has nothing to do with our class, but I tried Microsoft Edge, the developer version, beta version or something like that. So it's fun because it's super fast. So if anybody wants to try it, you can. This is that browser. Anyway, okay, so let's look at some of this. Okay, so our class is this one. Let me look at student view. Okay, so you have some assignments due here, and quite a few that are due next week. I probably will adjust this depending on what we cover today. But at the moment, you have quite a few that are due next week. Okay, and so anyway, going back to the Khan Academy, does anybody have any comments about Khan Academy?
I think the workload and the way Khan Academy teaches us and the difficulty of the activities are very manageable.
Okay, I'm sure that you're going to have many students here who hate you for saying that.
So be it.
No, but anyway, that's a nice comment. Anybody else on the opposite side of that argument?
I think the difficulty is all right, it's manageable, but the workload is very high.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure that it could be considered a lot, but anyway, I realize that, but I think it's on the higher end of what could be expected at in a course at APU, but it's not over the top, I don't think. So we will see what we can do, but I think that I hope that you find his explanations clear. That's the most important thing, I think. Anybody else? Okay, now I think that we're supposed to have a quiz today. So let me just check this out. Let's see. We have statistics. We have a quiz, I believe, on Manava. So actually, I would like you to open up Manava right now. And I'm going to give you a quiz. This is a quiz on, let me just check this. Can you see the quiz, my screen with the Manava open now or not? Or do you see Cengage, Webassign?
Cengage.
Okay. All right, anyway, let me just check this. Okay. Okay. All right, anyway, I think I'm going to postpone this right now. I'll have to check it a little more carefully. All right, so let's just, let's talk about the next set of topics. So let's go to our textbook, which is here. You can see my Webassign now, I think. So if I click on this, tell me if you can see that. No, I think you can't see this one. Okay. So I have to, oh, there it is. So now I don't think you can see that new window that opened up. So I think I have to unshare the original one. Resume share. Okay, so I have to share this one. No. Here. A little bit tricky here. Let's see. It's a little bit tricky to get this working. Okay, let's try it again. Stop sharing. Share. There it is. Okay. Okay, so you can see my our chapter now, right? Our book rather now, right?
Yes.
Okay. Actually, all right. So let's talk about some of these concepts. So this chapter, chapter 1, has the beginning is applications in business and economics. And then we talk about data and data sources. So let's just take a quick look at this first one. So statistics can be used in many different areas, especially in business and economics, and also in medicine, in science, actually basically everywhere. Wherever you have to deal with data, you want to be able to use statistics. So you can use it also in business and accounting, in finance, in marketing, production, economics, and information systems also. Okay, so let's talk about the main thing that we do in statistics is to analyze data. And data are facts and figures collected, analyzed, and summarized for presentation and interpretation. All the data collected in a particular study are referred to as the data set. So let's take a look at this. Unfortunately, if I open this up, I'll have to share it with you. Let's see, how can I do a better job of sharing this? Let me do a new share, and let me share screen 3. Okay, I'll do it that way. Okay, so now, no. Now I want to do that. Okay, can you see this, my screen again? Can you see? Okay, good. Sorry, let's go back to this. Hopefully you'll be able to see this as well. Table 1. Can you see table 1 coming up?
Yes.
Okay, so here's what is this data about? So usually to find out what it's about, of course, you would read the title. Okay, so what does the title say?
Data set for 60 nations in the World Trade Organization.
Right, so what does that mean? What is that? What's that? Anybody know what the World Trade Organization is?
Yeah, we do, of course.
You do know, okay. Maybe you know better than me. But I guess it's some kind of organization where many countries get together to sort of try to work out rules and so forth for trading, right? I guess.
Trade between nations.
Trade between nations, right. Okay, so this is a data set. And typically in a data set, we have columns and rows, okay? So, in fact, I can expand this just a little bit. So what are the columns that you see here? So, of course, you see the nation. What else?
Status, the GDP rating, Fitch outlook.
Right. And this, what is this? What is WTO status? I don't, I'm not really familiar with that. Are you? Or can we guess what that is?
World Trade Organization. That's just an acronym.
What is it?
World Trade Organization. Like WTO.
Yeah. WTO
Yeah, that's
status.
Just,
this one. This thing.
So you mean status?
Yeah.
Well, I guess it just like recognizes who is the which country is the member.
Yeah.
Which is not.
Okay, so I see almost everything in this screen here is the member, but there's one other value besides member. What is it?
Observer.
Observer. So I guess, I don't know what that means, but some countries are members and some countries are classified as observer, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. And what about the per capita GDP?
GDP stands for gross domestic capita. It's like the amount of value actually produced
by the country over a year.
Base. Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so and then what does the per capita mean?
Per person. So it means GDP per person. And it's a good measure for standard of living.
Yeah.
Ooh, okay,
exactly.
Great. So it's a good measure for standard of living. So Australia is significantly higher, like what would we say, like
sure.
about what is that? About more than 15 times high. Well, about 15 times higher than Armenia, right? So that means that standard of living is significantly higher, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. And okay, so we have per capita GDP. And then there's something else. Now, the next column is called what?
Fitch.
Right, Fitch rating, right? Fitch rating. So does anybody know what that means?
Yes, sir.
Yes, what does it mean?
Fitch rating is it's a credit rating status.
What kind of rating status?
Credit rating.
Credit rating, okay, great.
Yes.
Right, that's right. Fitch rating has something, oh, right, you're right. It's a credit rating status. So, for example, I guess countries can issue bonds, right? And then, you know, like you can buy bonds from a country, and they give you they give you interest, right? So they try and entice you to buy their bonds. Why do countries issue bonds? Why do they bother to do that?
Because of the fact that a country will always spend more than what it earns. So it needs other sources of actually obtaining funds for investing in itself.
Oh, great. Okay. So a country will always spend more than it earns. Doesn't sound like a very smart thing, but I guess every country does that. Or maybe it is a smart thing. But anyway, so this is kind of like they want to be able to get a loan from you, right? They want to borrow money from you, right? So they issue these bonds that have interest, yearly interest, or they just increase over time. The value increases over time, and that's how they get you to give them money, right? To lend them money, right? So I guess that's just a standard system in the world. Everybody does it, right? Right. So then there's this company called Fitch, and they rate how likely is this country to go bankrupt, or how likely are they to pay you back, right? So I mean that can be a concern, right? Some countries are more likely to pay back than others, and Fitch tries to analyze that. Now, how do they do that? Who knows? But they come up with this system of rating, right? So you can see that the ratings are what? AAA, BB minus, BB, B minus, BBB, AA, BBB, right? And so on, right? So, you know, this is some rating system. I'm not too worried about what it means, because this is not an economics class or a business class. We're just sort of studying these things in the abstract a bit. But anyway, there's some rating system here, right? Now, if you were studying finance, you would definitely want to know what precisely this is, right? But right now, I'm just going to say it's a rating system. Okay, and then there's another thing, last column, or is it the last column? There's another column, yeah, the last column is what? Something else, right, that Fitch does. They say the outlook. And what are the possible values that we see in this column?
So it says that it's either the economy of the country considered is either stable or unstable.
Stable and negative, right? And anything else besides stable and positive? Also positive, right? Stable, positive, negative. I think those are the only ratings that you can get as a country, right? Okay, so again, what do we call this thing? In our class, what do we call it?
Data set. We
call it a data set, right? This is a data set. So a data set, as I said, consists of, now you might think I'm just talking like I'm just sort of spouting off and I'm not talking about something important, but this is critical for our class, what I'm talking about here. The perspective how we view this table. Now, if you're in finance, you're going to think about it differently. I mean, you're going to think about precisely what does the rating, how do they calculate that rating, and so on. That's not what we're thinking about here. First of all, we're just thinking that this is a data set. Second of all, we're thinking that a data set consists of rows and columns, okay? And now, what are the rows in here? And in general, what are rows in a data set? But anyway, let's focus on this data set. What are the rows here?
The rows are representing a country. So Australia is a member with 49,755 per capita GDP. That's just a row for Australia, only one country.
Right, okay. So the rows are the countries. Now, I just want to make a strange distinction. Maybe you don't see why I need to do this, but I want to make a strange distinction between the country and its name. Seems silly, but you know, the row, I want to say the row is we say the row are different measurements of the country. And one of the measurements is its name, or one of the attributes of a country is its name. So let's take Japan. Is Japan on here? Yeah, here's Japan. Okay, so Japan, we can talk about different things regarding Japan. For example, what? We can talk about its WTO status, right? We can talk about its per capita GDP. We can talk about its Fitch rating and so on. But these are not the only things with regard to Japan that we can talk about. We could talk about its population, right? That's not listed in this table, but we could talk about it, right? What else? We could talk about, what else about Japan? The number of people, the number of, the percentage of men in Japan.
Okay.
Right? That's something else. What else? We could talk about
Number
the
of natural disasters.
The number of natural disasters per year. The land mass, right? These are all things we could talk about Japan. So Japan exists. Can you see my picture, by the way? Yes, you can. So Japan exists as a thing, and then we can measure different things about Japan. We can measure the WTO status, which is a member or not. The per capita income, that's something else. The Fitch rating, that's something else. The land mass, that's something else. So we have the country and then the different attributes or different variables that we can measure about that country. And one of the things about, you know, Japan is like this sort of abstract thing. And one of the things we can measure is its name. Okay, so we could say that the name or the nation is a variable. Now, in this text, they don't say that. In this text, they use this to identify the thing, and then these are the variables after the nation. Okay, so it's just a little, not so important, but I just want to mention that. Okay, so anyway, so we call the columns variables. So WTO status is one variable. Per capita GDP is another variable. Fitch rating is another variable, right? We call them variables or attributes, okay? And then each row is a different country or a different, in statistics we say each row is a different element of our data set. So the elements in this data set are the different countries, okay? The elements of this data set are the different countries. That's what we mean by elements. And another word that we use is individual. So, you know, individual sounds like you're talking about people, and that's because many data sets are dealing with people, but then they just use that word in general. They just say, well, let's be sloppy and just call everything individual. So here, the individuals are the countries, not people. And it doesn't have to be countries, it doesn't have to be people. You know, it could be whatever you're collecting data about. Like you could collect data about brands, right? Different brands of food, for example. And, you know, so the individuals would be the brands. Okay, so it doesn't have to be a person. Okay, so we call them elements or individuals. Okay, is this clear? Now, actually, the way I wanted to run this class was that at about this point, I would give you a quiz right now, and it would be based on group work. So I would divide everybody up into groups, and then you'd have a little quiz. And then you'd have a group quiz, and then you'd have an individual quiz. So after each little discussion like this, I want to have a little quiz. Now, I don't know how well that will work, because I'm not sure how long it takes to get it, like get everybody into the groups and then and so if it's really clumsy, I don't want to do that. But if it happens fairly smoothly, I want to do that. Now, it turns out that we didn't get the questions written today. So it looks like we won't do it today. Okay, but anyway, that's what I want to do. So we're going to have like a discussion, a 5-minute discussion, and then groups we're going to break up into groups and discuss a little quiz question, and then you'll have an individual question, and then we'll go back and have another discussion, another discussion. Okay. So anyway, I'll give you a vote. We'll do a vote this time because I don't have the quizzes in Manaba right now. So let me find my quizzes. Yes, okay, here. Okay. So let's look at this and we'll do a vote. Okay. So here's the question. Oh, sorry, not yet. We haven't gotten there yet. Okay, let's keep talking about the book first, and then we'll have this little vote. Okay, so data. So now I just talked about data, right? And the example was that data set, right? So we did that. Okay, now, and I also just talked about this, right? Elements. The elements of the data set, or the individuals of the data set. So elements are the entities on which data are collected. So in that last table, what were the elements? In table 1.
Country.
The countries, right?
Nations.
That's right, the countries. Each nation listed in table 1 is an element with the nation or element shown in the first column. So they say the first column is not a variable. With 60 nations, the data set contains 60 elements. Okay, now what is a variable? A variable is a characteristic of interest for the elements. So remember we said, okay, we can talk about countries. So what variables can we discuss with regard to a country? Well, you could come up with an infinite number of different variables, right? You could go nonstop forever talking about different variables. You could talk about Japan's most favorite color. You know, what most people like, the color that most people like in Japan. And then you could talk about the second most favorite color and the third most favorite color. And you could talk about their favorite beer. And you could talk about the land mass of Japan. And you could talk about the average weight of the people, and the average weight of men, and the average weight of women, and the average weight of 16-year-olds, and so on. You could go on forever talking about different variables. But what is a variable in general?
That doesn't have any fixed value.
What?
I think variables can keep changing.
Yes.
Oh, I see. Yeah, right. That's what that's what we sort of think about as a variable in math, right? That's the idea. You know, if I ask you in math, what's a variable? Everybody will say, oh, it's X, it's Y, it's Z. And then if I push you a little further, what do you mean by it's X or Y or Z? You mean it, oh, well, it's something that can change, right? Okay, that's good. But here we want to frame it a little bit differently. And we just say that it's a characteristic of the element. Okay? So what are the elements in this last data set?
The nations.
the nations, and then we can have many different characteristics. Those are each called different variables. Okay, so that's a different perspective, right, than the way we would say it in math. Don't you agree? It's a little different, but it's also, it's not counter to what we say in math. It doesn't go, it doesn't conflict with what we say in math, but it's a different perspective. Okay? All right. So a variable is a characteristic of interest for the elements. So we saw WTO status, per capita gross domestic product, Fitch rating, and Fitch outlook, right? Okay, the next word is this, measurements. Measurements collected on each variable for every, measurements are collected on each variable for every element in the study, provide the data. So what is, that's not very clear actually. What does that mean? I don't think it's written very clearly. Or put it this way, I would give an example before I wrote that sentence. Okay, what does it mean? The measurements, going back to this table, what do they mean by measurements? So the rows are the elements, right? We said that. The columns are the variables, right? We said that. The measurements are here, or let's use this one. So, I have to do something. How do I mute everybody? Some way to do that. Mute. Okay, what's this? Some way to do that. How do I do that? Is somebody talking? Oh, no. Well, anyway, I can't figure out how to mute everyone. Does TA know how to do that? All right. Okay, anyway, I heard some talking. Okay, so what are the measurements here? This is called a measurement. 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 The measurements are the, we say, I'm measuring Australia's per capita GDP, and that measurement is 44,758. Okay, or I say, I'm measuring Bahrain's per capita GDP, and that measurement is 22,579. Okay? Or I say I'm measuring Bahrain's Fitch rating, and it's BBB. So what are the measurements? They're what you get when you look at one element's, a variable for one element, you get a measurement. Okay, so it's the value of that variable for that element. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's what they mean by a measurement. Let's see what they say now. So going back to their definition now, measurements collected on each variable for every element in a study provide the data. So all of those measurements together are the data, right? If we go back and we look at all of the measurements, that's what we mean by the data. All of this stuff is what we mean by the data, right? That's the data. So it's all the measurements on all the elements with regard to all the variables. That's called the data. Okay, is that clear what we mean by a measurement? Okay, all right. So, okay, the set of measurements obtained for a particular element is called an observation. Okay, now that's not too hard to understand. Let me read it again though. The set of measurements obtained for a particular element is called an observation. So what's an example? Can anybody figure out from this definition what an example of an observation would be?
GDP.
No.
The example
No.
would be like Australia is a member or is a member in the WTO, and a GDP per capita is 49,000. Yeah, 49,755. So each of the rows.
Wait, I don't think you meant each of the rows. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. You mean each of the rows is a separate observation, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But on the other hand, that's right. But I could see where somebody would say, wait a second, I thought we said each row is an element. So it's a little confusing, right? But what we mean is each row, the value of each column for a particular row is called that element's observation. That sounds like a mouthful. So in other words, the observation for Armenia is member this, this, this. The observation for Australia is member this number, this, this, right? Okay. So does everyone get the idea of the word observation?
I've a question. So,
Yes.
so the GDP is not an observation, but isn't that us actually collecting information, actually seeing how much the average person earns per year? Isn't so? That's not an observation. I just wanted to clarify.
Right. Yeah. So we're going to call this number. We call that a measurement, right? I mean, I'm trying to get these. Why are we doing this anyway? Why are we making all these kind of weird distinctions? Because when we try to think about statistics, it's useful to have already registered these distinctions in our brain. You'll see that we can speak much more in a much more sophisticated way and much more clearly and much more intelligently if we can use these words and these distinctions, not these words, but these distinctions. Okay, and where do these distinctions come from, by the way? Now, how did they? Who came up with this stuff? Right? Why did anybody bother to say, oh, well, this is what we mean by measurement, and this is what we mean by an observation? Who did that? You know, did they just make this up to make trouble for students?
It's for convenience.
No. Actually, I would say my answer would be anyway that people studying, working with this stuff for a long time, right? People have been using statistics for a long time. They realized that they're different parts of the data, and you want to sort of separate them out conceptually. And they, before doing that, they would get kind of confused. They'd start doing something in one way, and then they'd realize, oh, this doesn't make any sense what I'm doing. They sort of move in the wrong direction because they haven't clarified their distinctions that they haven't recognized. So now we're learning the distinctions that they realized were important, that if they hadn't learned them, they didn't recognize them, they would just start making a lot of mistakes. Okay, that's what I would say anyway about this. But anyway, okay, so enough of that. But what do we mean by an observation? Oh, so you said, is this not an observation? So this is called a measurement, and the set of all the measurements for a particular row is called an observation.
Okay.
Okay, so this is called a measurement, but the set of all the measurements for a particular row is called an observation. Okay, so I know this sounds so nitpicky, but it's not. And believe me, it's really not. Okay, all right, so there we are. We've talked about observation. Okay, so we did this section on elements, variables, and observations. Now let's see if we can do it, what I would have done as a quiz, but let's do it as a poll now. So how do I set up a poll? Okay, I go to poll, add a question. Let's see. Now I have to sign in to do this, which is crazy, but now how do I do it? Okay. Okay, so let's save this. I call it. All right. Now, let me show you my screen again. Okay, ready? Go ahead. So this would be an example of a kind of quiz that we would have. No, today it's not a quiz, just a poll. Now, can you see the results of this poll, or can only I see the results?
We're unable to see the results.
Okay, I think I'll be able to share it with you, but I'll see about that.
Professor, can you please tell what does BBB stand for?
What's that? I can't hear you, sorry.
What does BBB stand for?
It's just the rating.
BBB is like this BBB here.
Fitch rating. It's a Fitch rating.
Yeah, it's here.
Fitch rating.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, I'm getting you. Thank you.
Okay, let's call it finished. Let's see if I end it now. I can share the results now. Okay, can you see the results?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, now let's think about it. WTO status. So the question is, which is a measurement, right? And we just went through this, these words like measurement and so on. So WTO status, or per capita GDP, or Fitch rating, or BBB. So let's see, set 9%, we got number one. We got 51% saying this one. We got 6% saying this one. And we got 35% saying this one. Now, this is a, how should we decide what is the correct answer? Should we just say the majority, that we should we make it a democracy?
No.
No.
Come on,
No.
really?
So you don't believe in democracy, is that right?
No. You end up with demagoguery.
Oh my goodness. Okay, all right. I believe in democracy sometimes, but not here. Yeah, I don't think democracy is the right way to decide the answer to this. In other words, I don't think that majority rule should be the right answer here necessarily. Anyway, so let's go. Sorry, what?
I just lost my internet connection for a while and I couldn't do the quiz.
Sorry, I can't hear you. I'm sorry. Can you say that again?
I lost my internet connection and couldn't do the quiz.
Now this is not a quiz. This was just a poll. So it's just a poll. I don't have anybody's names in here. Okay. So what about WTO status? What do we call that again?
Variable.
That's a variable or an attribute. Okay, good. So that's not a measurement. What about per capita GDP? What do we call that?
That will also be a variable.
That's also a variable, so that's not a measurement either. And what about Fitch rating?
Still a variable.
That's also a variable. Okay, and finally, what about BBB?
It's the measurement.
That's
a measurement,
Yeah,
right?
that's the answer.
Right, that's a measurement. So I think that's the correct answer. Okay, let's try another one. Let me try something first.
Sorry, could you repeat which is correct?
4.
4, okay.
Okay, now let me try something else. So I'll stop sharing that. And let me try something else. Okay, I want to try, no, not yet, sorry, can't do that. All right, now let's go back to the text and continue. So that's what we would do. We would have a little quiz like that. Not today though. So now I want to go back to the text and go to the next, sorry, we didn't talk, oh, so we did talk about observation, right? Everyone remember what observation is?
We do.
So
Yes.
Yep.
it's basically like, it's sort of like a row of measurements, right? Okay. All right, now let's go on. Scales of measurement. Okay, so this is, let's look at the table again. And okay. So we're going to talk about something called a nominal scale, an ordinal scale, a interval scale, and a ratio scale. And basically that means what kinds of values can you have for your variable? So for example, per capita GDP, what's the difference? What would you say is the difference between the type of values you get for per capita GDP versus the type of values or type of measurements that you get for WTO status? What's the difference in the type of measurements you get for WTO status versus per capita GDP? There's some kind of difference. I think we all, would very quickly want to say that these are different somehow, right? So what would you say? How would you say they're different?
Per capita GDP is numerical.
Yeah.
While status is categorical.
Right, that's right. So per capita GDP is a number, and this is not a number, right? Now, in mathematics, we usually deal with numbers. We don't deal with things that are not numbers. But this course is not exactly mathematics. And this course is dealing with data. Now, oftentimes, we think of data as numbers. It doesn't have to be. When you collect data about Japan, you don't have to just stick with numbers. You can talk about, like I said, the favorite beer of people in the age of 18 to 21. And then you can talk about the favorite beer of people in the age from 22 to 30. And so on. Those are not numbers. I mean, those numbers, I did mention some numbers there, but those are sort of not what we're talking about. We're talking about the favorite beer. The favorite beer is not a number, right? And that doesn't mean it's not interesting. I'm interested in what people's favorite beers are, right? What do people like? Do they like Asahi, or do they like Sapporo, or do they like some craft beer or whatever, right? Right? So those are not numbers. Doesn't mean that we're not interested in them. So when we're talking about math, usually we're talking about numbers. But when we're talking about data, we're not necessarily stuck with not just numbers. It's so different, right? Data that are numbers versus data that are not numbers. In fact, we don't even, before we started talking about this today, maybe you would have said data has to be only numbers. If it's not numbers, you wouldn't even consider it data maybe. But so what you're saying or what you're recognizing is that it's very different, right? Data that are not numbers and data that are not numbers are very, very different. It's obviously true. So we want to make that distinction here. We want to say that that we talk about the scale, the measurement scale. The measurement scale means what the values of the variable can be. So when we talk about WTO status, we're not talking about numbers. We're talking about only two possible things. What are the two possible things here?
Member or observer?
Yeah.
Right. On the other hand, for per capita, we're talking about numbers. On the other hand, for Fitch rating, what are we talking about?
Whether it's AAA or AA or BB minus or BB.
It's A to D to F.
Right, okay. So, but we're gonna call that still non-numeric, right? We're still gonna call it non-numeric or even categorical, all right? And then what about Fitch Outlook?
Well, it's categorical too.
It's also categorical. Okay, good. So we can make a distinction between numeric and non-numeric. Then we want to think about distinctions within the non-numeric types and distinctions within the numeric types. We want to sort of look at it a little more. So, for example, can you come up with, would you say, is there anything in your mind which distinguishes the type of non-numeric in here versus the type of non-numeric in here? The type of non-numeric WTO versus the type of non-numeric in Fitch rating. Is there any distinction? Of course you can say they're just different, right? They have nothing to do with each other, right? This is WTO status, this is Fitch rating, they have nothing to do. So of course there are distinctions, but I'm thinking of something else. So can you?
Professor?
Yes.
So I think that like non-numeric is like determined. So it is not like various kind of or indefinite numbers or variables. But like for numeric, we have maybe limitless numbers.
Ah, okay, that's good. But I don't want that. I want to know this difference between this category and this category. Now, both of them are non-numeric. But is there some kind of difference?
Professor?
Yeah.
Would it be like that other one is the Wto status is more like nominal measurement, and Fitch ranking would be more like ordinal measurement, the way that it gives ranking for the relationship of the video status and the rating, and the video status gives the are you like a member or not, so that makes it just like identifier.
Right, identifier, right, exactly, yes. So there's this, we're going to be talking about not just purely what we call nominal scale, but within nominal, where does that word nominal come from? Anybody know? That's a Latin root. It means name. Like I think in many European languages, that word means name, or something similar to that means name. Like probably in French, something de nom is that you're some kind of name. Like what's your name? So that word comes from the word name. Anyway, so these are just names. Member, those are just names. these are a little different than just names.
Ratings.
Yeah, the ratings.
Ranking.
There's a ranking there, right? What do I mean by ranking? Well, of course, which would you rather invest in, a triple A or a triple B? Well, you know the answer to that, right? I mean, everybody would give me the same answer. What is it?
Triple A.
Triple A, right? In other words,
A.
your rank, you already know that these are ranked, right? Now, is there any rank here? Well, you might say, yeah, there is a rank, but there's not really a rank here. Okay? I mean, maybe you could say there's a rank here, but we're not talking about that here. Okay? But these are obviously ranked. Okay? So nominal data, or sorry, categorical data, or non-quantitative data, qualitative data, can be completely unranked, or it might be ranked. Okay? Which word do you think we use for ranked? Nominal or ordinal?
Ordinal.
Ordinal.
Right. Where does that word ordinal come from?
Order.
Order, right. The same word as order. So we mean that there's an order in the data. Okay, everyone follow this? Okay, so this scale is called nominal, and this scale is called ordinal. Okay, is that clear? Everyone
Yep.
get it? Okay. So the thing
I think
about yeah,
the difference between ordinal and nominal, as well as with rankings, you have a more complex model that gives you more information. For example, membership status does not really give you information on whether a country is financially sound, a good investment, while in the Fitch rating, because you have so many standards that tells you if there's a lot of medium class companies or not, it tends to be more informative.
okay, that's kind of true because of the ordering, but just the fact that I mean, in WTO status, right now they only broke it down into member and observer, right? But we could have broken it down further. Maybe they have, I don't know, member type 1, member type 2, member type 3, member type 4, observer type 1, observer. Okay, so you could have many values in there, but it doesn't mean that it's ordered. Okay, so just because you have many values doesn't mean that it's ordinal. Okay, ordinal means that you can put them in a list and rank them. Okay, anyway, let's go on. What about Fitch Outlook?
It's, I think, nominal.
Yeah, it's nominal. I wouldn't call it, I mean, you might tend to want to rank it, right? Maybe you could, I mean, I guess you could, I don't know, you could decide, do you want to call this nominal or do you want to call it ranked or ordinal? Because they have stable, they have, I forget what they had, stable, positive, and negative, and you might say, you know, positive is better than stable and stable is better than negative. So you might say that it's ranked or you might not. I would probably argue that it's ranked, right? I think most people would say that positive is better than stable and stable is better than. So if you can rank them, if you can put them in an order, you can call it ordinal, okay? But you can also, maybe it's not a hard and fast rule. Okay, so within categorical, yes.
In your case, so you said that like the Fitch rate is nominal, but like if we put like the least stable, and middle, like that, we put like more position, so it will be like ordinal. Is that?
Yeah, that's right. I think we could argue either way. I guess I would agree that it's ordinal, but I think you could also say maybe it's just nominal. But it does seem like there's a natural order there, so call it ordinal. It's not a hard and fast distinction, maybe. Okay? But yeah, you're right. Okay, so let's go on. Okay, we have these concepts. So for quantitative, non-numeric data, we can distinguish between the two types are purely nominal versus ordinal, right? Okay, and then within the numeric types, we divide those types up into what are called interval and ratio. Okay, so interval. So they give as an example SAT scores. So when you have this is clearly numeric data, right? This is clearly numeric data. And so interval is when you can talk about the difference, like here, going back to ranking. I can say that AAA is better than AA, but I can't say how much better it is, right? Does everyone agree with that? I can say that AAA is better than AA, and AA is better than single A, but I can't say how much better it is. It doesn't tell me that. It's not in that data. It's not in that scale. Okay? Whereas if I'm talking about SAT scores and somebody got a 620 and somebody got a 550, I can do the ordering there, right? That's ordinal data, right? Right? I can do the ranking there. And not only that, though, I can tell you how much better. So which is better? How much better? What do I want to say? Is 620 better than 550 as compared to 550 than 470? Which is, I'm just asking, what's the difference between this and this?
So the former one is more?
Yeah, I don't mean that. I mean,
I guess
it's
heavily
70
relies
points.
on context.
No. I mean, this has the difference between here and here is 70, right?
Yeah.
And the difference between here and here is what?
80.
80. So this is, what do I want to say? This is higher above 470 than 620 is above 550, right? We can measure how much the difference is between the ranked data, right? So when you can do that, that's called interval scale.
All right.
Okay, whereas we can't do that here. We can't measure how much better is AAA than AA. But here we can say this is 70 points above this, but this is but this is 80 points above this, right? So that's called what kind of data when you can do that?
Numerical.
Interval scale.
Interval scale.
Right? You can look at the intervals between the data, and that has meaning, right? You can say 70 points. You can say 80 points. Okay, is that clear? Okay. Now, let's consider people's heights. So, first of all, is it nominal? I'm sorry, is it categorical or numeric?
Numeric.
Numeric.
Definitely numeric.
Numeric.
And okay, so it's not nominal. How about ordered? Is there an order? Is it ordered, people's heights? Yeah, of course, right?
Yeah.
You can say, one person is taller than the other person, right?
Ascending.
Okay, so it's definitely ordered. How about interval? So one person is 180 and one person is 175. We can talk about the difference, right? One person is 5 centimeters taller than the other. The intervals make sense, right? They have meaning. Whereas with the Fitch scores, you can't subtract double A from AAA. It doesn't make sense. You can't do that. But here we can do interval, right? Does everyone agree?
Yes.
Now we can do yeah, sorry.
I'd like to ask the question. Couldn't you say that, let's say, for when we're talking about the Fitch score, couldn't you say this country that's AAA is 2 rankings above this country? That's
you can do that.
Rankings below.
You can say 2 rankings above, but you don't know how much better that is. You can't measure the difference, right? You can't. In other words, you can't subtract one from the other.
So it always just has to.
It has to do
the
with
difference always has to
subtractions.
be in numbers.
I
Even
think
if
we
the
don't have a
difference means
value.
different
You have to,
standards.
it has to do with the mathematical operation of subtraction.
Okay.
Okay?
We need to have a value of difference between the numbers.
Sorry? Yeah.
We have to, the value of difference.
Yeah, you have to be
Of
able
course
to,
we do. Yeah.
in order to be called interval, you have to be able to do subtraction. Literally subtraction.
So we need numbers, right, all the time.
Right, it has to be numbers.
Okay.
You have to be able to do subtraction. So it has to be numbers. Okay, so how about height? We said, is that interval? Yes. You can definitely do subtraction, right? Okay. Now one more thing. And that is ratios. Can I say somebody who, let's take somebody who's 180 centimeters tall, and then let's take a kind of a young child who's only 90 centimeters tall, right? Can I take their ratio? Does that make sense?
Yes.
In other words, can I say that the person who's 180 is twice as tall as the person who is, yeah, of course I can, right? I can say the person who's 180 is twice as tall as the person who's 90, right? So I can do this ratio. I can do division, right? And that division makes sense, right? I can say, just like I said, or let's take time. You had to wait at the bus for 5 minutes, and somebody else had to wait on the bus, at the bus station for 10 minutes. Can you say that the person who waited 10 minutes had to wait twice as long? Yes, of course, right? You can form the ratio, okay? Now you'll say, wait a second, can I do that with SATs? Well, can you? Can you say that somebody who got 300, somebody who got 600 did twice as well as somebody who, you don't say that. We don't say that in SATs. No, you don't say it. You might say it, but it's not correct to say that. You don't say people did twice as well because somebody got 600 versus somebody got 300. It doesn't work that way.
Again, it all depends on, I think, the context. If a person understands how SAT scores are measured, what leads to one person having a larger, like a bigger SAT score number.
Right, but you're right. It depends on what they understand, but not really. You can't really say it. Maybe people don't understand that you can't say it, but in fact, you can't say it. It's not measured that way. You don't say that in SATs. Okay, maybe the SAT isn't the best example. Here's another example. Let's take the temperature. So yesterday it was 15 degrees, and today it is 30 degrees. Would you say it's twice as hot today? No, we don't say that. We don't say
actually we can.
Yeah, you can, but it doesn't mean anything. You would say that it's 15 degrees hotter today than it was yesterday. That means a lot. But you don't say that it's twice as hot. It's like there's twice as much of something. No, you don't say that.
Professor,
for example, you might say, what does temperature really mean? It means the energy of the molecules, right? That's the way we think of temperature, right? So it's not true that there's twice as much energy in the molecules when it's 30 degrees as when it's 15 degrees. Okay, that's not true. Somebody raised their hand, Rohan.
Yeah, Professor. So what if it's the temperature of today is given, or yesterday is given, 15 degrees, and then today I say that it's twice as hotter. Is that okay?
No, it's not. It doesn't mean anything. It's really not an intelligent. Let me put it this way: you can say it. Of course, you can say it, but it's not intelligent. It's not an intelligent thing to say.
You can't really measure the feeling.
It doesn't. Let me continue.
So
let me continue. So temperature really is a measure of how much energy there is in the molecules. And it's not true that there's twice as much energy in the molecules when we go from 15 to 30. But you probably also know, okay, first of all, when we talk about the temperature in Japan, we use the Celsius scale, right? Or the centigrade scale, right? Now, in my country, in America, they use the Fahrenheit scale. So it's a different scale. But neither of those are what we call ratio scale. The ratios don't make sense. However, there is a scale for temperature that does make sense as a ratio scale. Ratios do make sense. What's that scale? What's that measurement scale for temperature? It's not Fahrenheit, it's not Celsius centigrade, but there is one, and probably some of you know it.
Kelvin.
What is it? Kelvin. That's right. Kelvin. Let me do this. Kelvin. Kelvin. See if I can figure out how to do this. Does anybody use OneNote, by the way? Anyway, Kelvin. Now, what is Kelvin? I sort of forget myself. I think let's see, Celsius, when it's 0, I think Kelvin is measured at I think it's 273. Maybe I have that wrong. And 100 would be 373. Okay, I might have these numbers wrong, but I think this is right. Anyway, the difference between here and here is definitely 100. I know that. And I think 0 in Celsius in Kelvin is 273. So if this is 273, what is 0 in Kelvin? What is 0 in Kelvin? By the way, can you see my OneNote screen?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, so what is 0? What does 0 mean?
Minus 273.
Yeah, it's minus 273 centigrade. And what's special about that?
It's absolute 0 point.
Yeah, it's absolute 0. Absolute 0. What does absolute 0 mean? It means there's no temperature below that. That's one way to say it, but what else? When we're talking about the molecules, what happens to the molecules at absolute 0?
Stops moving.
They don't move at all. 0 movement, 0 energy. Okay? So when it's absolute 0, the molecules don't move. Then when it's in Kelvin, when it's 100, they're moving. And when it's 200 in Kelvin, they're moving more. And the energy of the system when it's 200 is twice as much as when it's 100. So when if we use Kelvin, then we can talk about ratio scale making sense. Because there's in other words, to talk about ratios, you need for the 0 point to have some specific real meaning. It means the absence of whatever you're measuring. So here, when it's 0 in Celsius, that doesn't mean the absence of something. It's just an arbitrary number where water freezes. It's not the absence of what we're measuring. It's not the absence of temperature. But here, 0 is the absence of temperature or the absence of energy. Okay, so if 0 means there's no of that quantity existing, then you can consider ratios and they mean something. But if there's not that, if you can't interpret 0 that way, then ratios don't make sense. Okay, so that's what we mean by ratio scale. When ratios make sense. So as I said, SATs are not really ratio data. They are interval data. Okay? Let's go back to that screen. Okay, so height is ratio data though, right? Because if somebody has a 0 height, that means something, right? That means there's no height, right? So you can say one person who's 180 is twice as tall as somebody who's 90. Also weight, same thing. Somebody who's 100 kilograms is twice as heavy, or something that's 100 kilograms is twice as heavy as something that's 50. Time, something that takes 10 minutes is twice as long as something which takes 5 minutes, right? Okay, so these are ratio scale. Interval scale is not, you can't do, but a ratio, by the way, weight, is that also interval scale? Weight is ratio, is it also interval? Yes.
Yes.
It can be also.
Right, so the things that are ratio are also interval, not the other way around. Yes, John, Christian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Professor, that can't we like think the interval and radio scale, like the interval scale can be also like 0 simply comes like an additional point only. Like we have this in interval scale we have the, well, let's take the Fahrenheit or degrees. We can go under the 0 and we don't have like quantity, and we are gonna do the equality of the units, but in the radio it's all about the quantity and the equality, and we cannot really go under the 0. It's always like
that's a good point. I never thought of that, but I think that's right. That could be right. Sounds right. So you can go below 0 for if you can go below 0, he's saying, then it's not ratio.
Yeah.
So that might be true. I never thought of it, but it might be true.
And it's
yeah.
In like SATs, we have also like some kind of like scoring system that we can get pass and that we fail, and that point is the additional 0 points, and we can go like under it and we can go like past it also. That and we go past it, we get go past, and we like how to say it. Well, we pass the test, but if we go under it, we fail the test.
Right. Now, there's one problem with what you just said, and that is actually SATs. Obviously you can't go below 0. But anyway, I don't know about it, but it sounds there's something right about what you said. Okay, so anyway, I don't want to spend. I mean, I do want to spend, but I think we've covered it. We've covered this concept of scales of measurement. Those are the types of variables. Oh yeah, Harima, yes, Mr. Harima.
Yeah, I think the better way to understand, like for temperature, like for example, like if for someone who's living in Thailand and someone who's living in like Russia, they feel like the same 15 degrees might not be the same as like 2 times higher. And for
that's why you can't measure feelings.
Yeah, and in
Wait,
case
what did you say? I didn't follow what you said.
So if you compare with someone who's living in Russia and where it's cold, and someone who's living in Thailand, they might feel like 15 degrees in Thailand they might feel cold, like they might feel like colder.
But in Russia they think it's not cold.
And also,
that's okay. But the thing is, this is really about basically it's like the kinds of operations you can do, mathematical operations. That's really what it boils down to. It's not really about other stuff. It's really about the kinds of mathematical operations you can do. So nominal, you can't do any mathematical. Here you can order things, which is kind of a mathematical concept actually. And here you can do subtractions, and here you can do divisions. Okay, now you might say, well, you can do divisions here, but you can't really. They don't make sense here. Okay, it's not really about perceptions, which is what you were just saying. Okay, okay, anyway, we have covered this topic. So if you understood what we said, it's good. Okay. Okay, now we have a distinction between categorical data and quantitative data. And we've already talked about that. Okay? Yes, sir? Yeah. So we had categorical data, which is either nominal or ordinal. And then we have numeric values, quantitative. Okay? Now, one of the reasons we make distinctions like this is because you would think, okay, what's one of the main basic things we would do in the study of statistics? Like what we do what we call summarizations. What's one of the main summarizations that we do in statistics? I don't know, maybe, I mean, I'm not asking it very clearly, but one of the main summarizations we do is calculating the average of a bunch of numbers, right? We do that all the time, right? And we call that statistics, right? I give you 100 numbers and I say, you know, summarize that and you'll give me the average, right? So I give you a bunch of data and I say, summarize it and you're going to give me the average. But you can't do that with categorical variables, right? If I say, you know, go back to that table and I say, summarize the Wto status, you can't take the average, right? That doesn't make any sense. You know, you might be kind of creative and do something, but that's not what we mean by doing the average, right? You can't take the average. So, so that's why we have to, you know, otherwise you're going to, I mean, to be honest, I started doing some pretty stupid stuff once when I was analyzing data for my PhD, and I realized like I wasn't making the distinction between categorical and numeric data. And I was trying to do things, you know, that I would do with numeric data. I was trying to do it with categorical data, and I was like kind of spinning around. And then I realized, what are you doing? This is nonsense, you know? So, you know, you have to make the distinction. You know, maybe it seems obvious, but I guess if you get, you know, sort of deep into something and you just sort of forget that. Okay, so you have to make the distinction between quantitative and categorical variables. All right? Okay. So let's go on. Okay, now, within quantitative variables, we have this distinction: cross-sectional and time series. Okay, so what is that? So this is time series. So what is this? Well, what does it say?
Average price per gallon for conventional regular gasoline.
Okay, average price per gallon. Everybody know what a gallon? Gallon is like a liter. Actually, it's equal to about 4 liters. But it's a measure of volume, like liter is a measure of volume. Okay, it's about 4 liters is 1 gallon. Okay, so this is the average price, let's say per liter of gasoline. By the way, what's happened to the price of gasoline in the last 6 weeks?
I believe it jumped.
It dropped.
Just by a little bit, maybe? No?
No, in the last 6 weeks.
It dropped a lot.
Or let me put it this way. What happened to the average price of oil in the last 6 weeks?
It dropped
Decreased
below
dramatically.
0.
Yeah, it went down to 0. The price of oil in the last 6 weeks, I don't know about right now, it went down to 0.
Yeah.
In fact, it went down below 0. What does that mean? That means people would pay you to keep the gasoline for them because the storage is costly.
Yeah.
To store it was costly. So that's crazy, right? But I don't know how in the world that happened, but it did happen. But anyway, this doesn't go down to 0 in this data. But what's happening? I mean, sorry. But what is the x-axis here?
Time.
Time, right? Did everyone see that? Whenever the x-axis is time, that data is called time series. So whenever you're looking at time-based data, that we call that time series. Now, why do we make that distinction? Because time series, when you analyze data that's measured over different periods of time, you have to do certain things that you have to think about certain things that you wouldn't think about otherwise. For example, if the price is high here, the next day it's probably going to be relatively high. In other words, you don't usually get that the price is here, then it goes down to here, then it goes up to here, then it goes down to here, then it goes up. Usually if it's high here, it'll be relatively high the next day. Not completely high, but relatively high. It's not completely random. So time-based data has that property. And oftentimes in analysis, though, we assume that the data doesn't have that property, that it's completely random in a sense. And you can't do that with time series. So anyway, regardless of that, we make a distinction between time series data and non-time series data. So if it's not time series, what is it called?
Cross-sectional.
Cross-sectional.
Cross-sectional. So the difference between cross-sectional and time series is measured at different points in time. Time series is measured at different points in time. But cross-sectional data then must be what? If it's not measured at different points in time, then what?
One instance of time?
Yeah. It's all measured at the same time. So what's an example of cross-sectional data?
Number of cars in a parking lot this morning?
Yeah, maybe. But also the data that we just saw. This one. What is this? Is this time series or cross-sectional?
Yeah, that's cross-sectional.
Cross-sectional.
It's all measured at the same time, right?
Yeah.
At one point in time. Maybe tomorrow this could change, right? Or next year. This could change, right? The per capita GDP will certainly change. Maybe the WTO status might change.
Yeah.
Maybe the Fitch outlook and so on might change. This is not time series. It's not measured at different times. Right? It's measured at the same time. So this is called what?
Cross-sectional.
Cross-sectional. But this is not cross-sectional.
Of course it's not.
It's measured at different times. Right? That's the whole point of it, to measure it at different times. Right? We want to look at the pattern over time, right? That's what we're interested in here. Okay? So we have this distinction, and this is for sorry, I made a mistake. This is not just for numeric. I think, well, for time series, it's almost always numeric. But cross-sectional, we just saw it wasn't just numeric, right? We just saw it could be non-numeric, right? Okay? But the point of cross-sectional versus time series is that one is measured all at the same time and one is not. Okay. Okay, that's all for today. Now, hopefully next time we'll be able to have group. We won't spend so much time talking continuously. We will try to break up into groups and we'll see how that works. Okay? All right, so I will give you some homework based on this, or maybe I have to actually remove some homework based on what we covered today. Okay? Doesn't mean you can't do And when I say remove it, I mean push it further out, the due date further out. It doesn't mean you can't do it, but I will have the homework that is due based only on what we covered today. All right?
Yes, Professor, I have a question about attendance. How is attendance marked for this class?
Generally, it's going to be based on quizzes, in-class quizzes. But today we didn't have it. But next time we will. Okay?
Sure.
Okay, and then of course you also will have Khan Academy also. Okay? So I hope that you learn a lot. Yes, so starting today you have to do Khan and Webassign for next week, for next week. Okay, so you have to do Webassign homework and Khan Academy work. Okay, so you hopefully will become very comfortable by the end of the semester with this material. So you'll be kind of hopefully masters of the material. All right. Okay, that's all for today. And anybody have any questions? Any more questions?
Sorry, I have a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, so on Webassign, I think the assignment, we couldn't tell if we were right or wrong, but like they already scored us and there's only 4 attempts.
I'm not sure what you're saying, but let's see. Webassign is, well, here. So mine looks a little different than yours, but what are you saying?
Yeah, so if we're like, put our answers in there and then if we got it wrong, they will say that we're wrong, but we don't know which one is the right answer. So for attempt.
I think, okay, you don't know which one is right. That's true. I might change that. I'll have to take a look at that. I did that on purpose.
Okay.
But I think after the second answer, you might know what's right or wrong, or no?
No,
Your second attempt?
Yeah, I already went until like number 4. It's still the same.
Still doesn't show. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, let me look at that. I'll check it.
Okay.
Okay, can you can our TA also make note of that?
Okay, Professor, I already noted this one.
Okay, great.
The previous question is like similar to this question.
Okay. Oh, right. That's right. Okay.
Professor.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
About Khan Academy submission deadline, I had some problem with it, and I couldn't manage all of the tasks. And what
you couldn't manage all of the what?
All of the assignments in the Khan Academy.
Oh, you couldn't manage to
Yeah.
go through all of them, or you couldn't get a perfect score on all the quizzes. Which one?
No, I couldn't manage all of them.
Why not?
So, can you give us some advice on that?
Professor, me too.
Okay. How many people had that experience?
Hey, Professor, can I say something?
Okay, 4 people raised their hands.
Yes.
Okay.
Me too.
So, okay. Yeah. So, in that case, I would say you should spend more time. That's what
Professor, like the problem is that some of the students had problems with like accessing the assignments given on Khan Academy. So many of us got the assignments on Tuesday, like 30 or 20% of all students got it only on Friday, I guess.
Okay, I see. Okay.
Yes.
Oh, okay. That's a different story. Okay, but that's the problem for this week, but that shouldn't be a problem for next week.
Yes, of course.
So everybody registered. Okay, in that case, we will be lenient with what happened this week, because it was kind of experimental this past week. But for next week, you should be able to get through the next set. The current set that was due this week and the next set. Okay? Yeah, if you had trouble with the registration, yeah, we had some problems with that. Okay, anybody else?
Professor.
Yes, I have a question regarding how do you actually view your progress or how you did in that batch of homework? So for example, this is the first week's worth of homework. How do we view our total grades for the first week of homework?
There's not a grade like that, but there's how well you did on the quizzes. And then there's just the fact that you went through the videos as well. So both of those are components of your homework score.
Well, Professor,
Yeah.
well, that's the case on Khan Academy, but how about Cengage?
For Cengage, you have homework, and you can see what your score is. After the due date, you should be able to see your score.
Okay. Thank you.
Professor?
Yes.
You said you're going to check our attendance by taking quiz. And then does the quiz also affect our grade?
Yes, it does. It definitely does, yes. But of course, we didn't have any today because we didn't have them up, but we will next week. Any other questions?
Professor.
Yeah.
The Webassign doesn't still work with me, and I even bought the access code for it, and I already told the TA that it doesn't still work, and he
You can log in.
I can log in the Webassign and Cengage, but the book still shows me that the product has expired, and I cannot go in the book and do nothing with it.
So you can't do the homework?
No.
Oh.
And that's a problem.
Yeah, okay. If that's true, can you again write to the TA today, right after class?
Yeah, I write TA already on the class.
Yeah, can you just do it again today?
Yeah,
Anybody
of
who
course.
still has that problem, write to the TA, and we have to go and talk to Cengage again. And give it, when you write to the TA, give as much information as you can, especially the class that you're in, your ID, your email, as much information as you can, so that we can specify you and the exact problem to Cengage. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay, I apologize for it, but I don't know. Well, it has to do with the fact that they gave us mixed information, and so anyway, hopefully we'll get it solved within fairly quickly, and then there should be no problem after that once we get it solved. So it might be a problem for the first week or two, like you're having, but we will get it solved, and you'll be fine after that. Okay. But anyway, please write to our TA, and when we collect that information, we'll send it to Cengage. And we apologize for the problem up to now. Anybody else?
Thank you, Professor.
Professor?
Yeah.
I had trouble with the internet connection, so I couldn't hear you well, but may I confirm that there's a way that I can check whether my answer is true or not on Cengage? Is that on Khan Academy as well? Is that?
On Khan Academy, yeah, you can see whether you got things right or wrong when you take the quizzes. But afterwards, I'm not sure if you can see it. But as you're taking it, you can see if you get it right or wrong, that's for sure. And on
So
Cengage,
when I'm taking it, yes.
Yeah, and on Cengage, yeah, you can, after you finish the test, the homework assignment, you will see your score. I don't know if you see it immediately or if you see it after the due date. I'm not sure yet.
You can see it immediately.
Yeah, you can see it immediately. I thought
And
so.
it also shows you're right or wrong, but and you also retake it.
Right. Okay. Okay, any other questions?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Does that mean that for Khan Academy assignment, should we aim for like 100% for each assignment so that like we get high grades?
I'm sorry. Does that mean on Khan Academy that what?
Like for all the assignments, should we try to get like 100% to get highest grade?
Yeah. Yes. It does
So
mean that.
percentage of each assignment affect our grades as well.
Yeah, it doesn't, each assignment is not, doesn't have too much value, but you should try to get, 80% I think is good.
All right, I see.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Anybody else?
Professor, I have one more question. Like can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
Well, on Khan Academy, like in case we don't get 100%, we can try again. So there is like that access to the.
Right. I think 80% is good enough in Khan Academy. I mean, of course, if you get 100.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm interested is, in case we try like a lot, say 5 times, so does this affect our grade?
No, you can do it as many times as you want.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Anybody else?
Professor?
Yes.
May I ask you the thing with you teach me today that like elements is column or rows? Sorry.
Elements, there's two words that mean the same, two words for the same thing. One is element and the other is individual. So they both mean the same thing. And they refer, the country Japan is one element. The country Armenia is another element. The country Thailand is another element. Okay? And then with each element, you can measure different things. You can measure the size, the population. You can measure the GDP. You can measure, so the element is sort of what the rows, basically. The row, first element is like the first row. Second element is like the second row. Third element is the third row. Okay?
Yes, so element is row. Thank you so much.
And it's written in the book also. You can read the book.
Yes, thank you so much.
That's all we did today was read the book.
Yes.
Professor?
Yeah.
My name is Hassan. I was not able to use Khan Academy through my laptop, but I was able to Khan Academy through my iPhone.
Okay.
And I tried to finish the assignment, but I couldn't finish all of them. And last classes, I shared my problem to you. So in this case, what can I do?
You can't use Khan Academy on your computer?
Yeah. Now at this moment, I can use Khan Academy through my computer.
Oh, okay, good.
Now it's okay.
Okay, so it's okay. I mean, the first week, we're not really taking the first week into account that much because, people had trouble like you had trouble and people had trouble registering. But as long as you can, as long as things are going now, then we're going to start taking, measuring your Khan Academy performance from now. Okay, we don't expect the first week. Things were very much.
And I have another questions like you told us next class you will take a quiz and based on second lecture or first lecture.
Okay. Next lecture, there will be 2 types of quizzes. You have new Khan Academy work. So it'll be there'll be a few questions on that.
Yes.
And the homework that you have to do for this week in Cengage, we'll also have a few sample questions from there also. So both of the homework that you have to do for this week, you'll have a quiz next week in class.
Professor, I didn't buy Cengage.
You don't have to buy Cengage yet. You can still use it.
How can I buy Cengage?
You don't have to. Well, how can you buy it?
Yes.
You can buy it through the co-op store, or you can also buy it. There's another. We showed another way to buy it. There's two ways. If you don't know that, you can ask the TA.
Okay.
You can write to the TA, but you don't need to buy it just. Well, you're going to have to buy it by the end of by about the our next meeting. You probably have to buy it by then.
Okay.
Anybody else?
How much cost is it?
It's 4,900 yen plus tax.
Yeah, around 5.
A little bit more than 5, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you. I have to run to another class.
Yeah, thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Professor.
Bye.
Thank you, Professor.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.